If someone's in a good place, nothing touches them. If someone's not in a good place, anything can touch them.
Steve Peters, the leading psychologist who's worked with sporting icons like Steven Gerrard, Sir Chris Hoy and Raheem Sterling, joins us today on High Performance.
When I wrote this, everyone says build resilience, build resilience. Science doesn't actually back that. We can't deal with multiple problems. It's not an advantage to have high self-esteem. I get inside their head and then I see the world the way they see it. If you think about it, if we remove this influence of this primitive survival system which thinks for us, you'll be confident, happy, carefree.
This episode is supported by Huel.
Steve, welcome to High Performance.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been described as the secret man behind some of the world's most successful people. When you first work with someone, what's the most important thing that you need to know about them from the off?
What they want. And sometimes people don't know what they want, or they give me something that they say, I want this. And then when you get into it, it's actually something different. So from my perspective, it's being able to get inside someone's head. And then when I get in, that's the way I operate. It's not for everyone. I get inside their head and then I see the world the way they see it with the main key factors in it. And then usually, because it's not overly happy world I work in, as a psychiatrist, that then you realise what's wrong and you want to get out. So then you think, okay, these are the things that are really impressing me. And then you feed back to the person, which is how I work. And then we say, right, what will work for you? But I don't have fixed process. What I do is, it's more, the model I use is to give you the tools to do what you want to do. I'll give you some insights and question, is it this? So I would say to people, I sit the same side of the table as you. If you work with me, we work together and we explore your mind. That's how I do it.
And I think a lot of people see your name or see your CV and click on this episode because they think, actually, there is something that I'd like to unlock, but not everyone can get access to you.
Yeah.
Are we able, and this requires real honesty from you as well, are we able to sit here for an hour or an hour and 20 minutes and actually have a conversation that will allow people to do some work on themselves afterwards?
You can, because there's generally, when I do like public speaking, which is always a privilege, in the audience, when I first started, I asked people, what did you actually get from that? Because I needed feedback to know, obviously I have no idea. And it shook me a bit to think everybody picked something different up. And then I realised, well, you just got to throw things out. And if it resonates, people will pick them up. If it doesn't, they'll just pass by it. So I'm not too worried, but you try and keep it fairly general. But as we said just off camera, my difficulty always with this is I ask for like 5 tips for the listeners, and I can't do this. So I always try and say to people, don't ask me to do that, because I don't know what's a tip for you until I get to know you. And it may be exactly the opposite if I'm working with you. And think, so the answer is I can give generic things, like, for example, know what your values are. Because we know that, look, and I'm a nerd, I don't like to admit that, but I'm a nerd who has to read to make sure I know what I'm doing, rather than someone who is interested. I am interested to learn and use this with people. The research indicates, simplifying it, that if we know our values and we live by them, you get peace of mind, and there's nothing else gives peace of mind. So it's a frequent thing that people ask me for, is how do I get peace of mind? And I say, well, you've got to go on your values. When you go on your values and you monitor them, which I make people do work, and they start learning to do that, they'll say, at the end of the day, I look at my values and that settles me down completely.
Well, maybe we should start there then. If someone's listening to this and they go, right, I need to find my values, how do people go about doing that?
I think there's lots of different ways. It gets confusing because if you go on the internet, you'll find that people define values differently. But so I'm going with what I do. And it's to say that a value is a moral stance with a behaviour that's attached to it. And what we're going to do is measure your behaviour. So, for example, nearly everybody says respect others. There's not many people don't say that. And when they say respect others and I ask, well, how do you do that? They don't know. Because it is hard to say. And so I give them ideas of saying, one key one is to listen to people. So when you meet somebody, listen to what they have to say, feedback so you've understood. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but that actually empowers the person, and it's respecting them, and it's respecting the fact that they've got an opinion and you're willing to listen to that and understand it. So if you do that, my experience is if you measure that, people say it not only makes you feel good because you're living out a value, you know you're respecting now, it's not just in the air, but also they said you learn a lot because people tell you things you weren't really expecting or didn't actually appreciate. So it gives a better relationship. So the spin-offs. So that's an example. But again, I wouldn't do that with everybody. If somebody's coming in with a different kind of problem, because in my world, it could be anything.
Yeah.
So if somebody, for example, take an extreme example, came in with grief, a severe loss, that wouldn't be going down the route of values and peace of mind. So it would say to the person who comes in, what would you like me to achieve with you by the end of whatever number of sessions we're going to do? And they might then say, come to terms with.
Yeah.
So what are the other common, you said we can speak here about generic factors. Yeah. What are the other common challenges that you help people face?
I think I'm going to go on what I've just said because one of the common things I find is, from neuroscience point of view, we can't deal with multiple problems. Our brain just does circles, so we just keep moving from one to the other without solving anything. So going back to what I said, when I meet you at first, let's get a piece of paper and say, write down all the things that you want to solve, all the problems you've got, whatever they are, just put them all down. And it can be current problems, things that haven't been processed in the past, worries about the future. Once we've got them all down, you'll feel a sense of relief that suddenly it's not endless. But if you've even got normally about 3 problems, your mind won't deal with it. It just moves one to the other. It never actually moves forward.
Why is that?
Because it's not able to process the information. So when something's in your head, we know if you talk, you objectify it, you move outside. So, for example, expressing an emotion accurately. If you said, I'm angry, and it's not actually the emotion that you're really giving, and I'm saying, is it more disappointment? And you think, actually, it's a better word. Then we know from research done that once you've given it a name, it's an entity, we can now start to process it. If you don't express it or express it accurately, then your mind is still trying to tell you that's not the right word, or I can't find the word. So it just keeps going, trying to find a word. So the power of therapy is the fact that we talk out. And on the model I've used with the mind is our different system listens to what we're saying, which is why sometimes when we talk, we'll say, stop, that's ridiculous. Because suddenly we've expressed it and we're able to process it and put it into context or perspective, whereas in your head, you can't do that. I'm going to ramble now, but I did a charity conference a long time ago, and I tried to get this concept over, and I live out in the wilds, and there were a lot of apple trees and fallen apples. So I took a lot of apples in and asked them to juggle, just to stop doing heavy academic work. And I could see the puzzle look, said, there's a reason. And everyone could do 2 apples. Most people couldn't do 3. Nobody managed 4. Now, I know they're probably the juggler, which they exist. And I said, that's how your mind works. Never forget. Once you've got more than 2 problems, you're not going to make it. Your mind's going to start stressing and going round and round. Now, there will be exceptions to the rule. But my experience has been once we put things down and they say, right, there's 6 things we're going to address, there's a sense of relief because now we have a plan, which is what the brain is looking for.
And can we get that sense of relief without sitting down with someone like you? Like, can we do this at home? Now, though, it's time to focus on keeping those good habits. And that's where Huel comes in. It can help when you're on the move, taking the kids to school or squeezing in that morning gym session. It's ready in seconds, so saves you time and effort. And our show is sponsored by Huel, the world's leading complete nutrition brand. And this is what I love. 35 grams of protein, essential nutrients such as vitamin D and fiber. The black edition, ready to drink, is great. And you can get 15% off right now, plus a free gift for new customers by using the code HP at Huel.com. And as well as being nutritious and low in sugar, it basically just tastes like a chocolate milkshake. You can get this in chocolate and vanilla flavor. So if you fancy 15% off, if you fancy a free gift, if you're a new customer, just go to Huel.com and use the code HP. Fuel your day with Huel.
Yeah, you can do it yourself. I think it helps because, again, we're diving in a bit, but simplifying all the time. But the brain wants someone to understand us. We're built to be understood. When people don't understand us, our brain gets quite agitated. So if somebody gets where you're coming from, just one person, you get this, right, I'm okay now. So again, talking out with someone who can tease it out of you and say, yeah, I get this. can help on that aspect of what the brain needs. Whereas if I do it myself, say, and I write out all the problems, it can work. So some people can do it. But most people like someone to hear them and then acknowledge that.
I really like the example you mentioned there, though, about taking an emotion and exploring it for the subtlety. We had a guest on that spoke about feeling jealous of a competitor, and then when she explored it, she wasn't jealous. She said she was envious because she wanted that, and that she felt that was more empowering.
That's a brilliant example. So again, that's the kind of thing that might come to the door where you're listening and you challenge this. Say, the reason we're not moving on is it's the wrong word. And then when you explore that, when we look at envious, I would push again. I have no idea who this was, don't need to know. But I don't know where it's going to go, but I come underneath the envy, what's underpinning that? And sometimes it can be a feeling of low self-esteem, for example, and the idea that if I achieve something, that will give me the self-esteem, which we know doesn't work because you just dismiss it as soon as you've achieved it. It's very rare that you hold on to it and say, oh, I'm so proud of this. You get unsettled to think, well, that was yesterday. Or I've even had Olympians saying, well, everyone's got an Olympic medal. So, which obviously isn't true, but that's the way your brain works. It normifies what you've actually achieved and then usually dismisses it. Again, there will be exceptions.
Yeah.
Would you just tell us more about the self-esteem thing? Because that, I can imagine, is quite a common challenge that lots of people have of dealing with low self-esteem.
So I'm going to go again neuroscience because that's my background. Yeah. So wearing my hat as the doctor, I'd be saying, right, let's look at what your brain is doing. And as you know, I invented this chimp model. And the reason I brought that in is to say you've got to recognize there are two different systems operating. This is clear. So one of the systems here is meant for survival. It's not an advantage to have high self-esteem. Because if you have a high self-esteem, you leave yourself very vulnerable. So having low self-esteem, you're much more vigilant to potential attacks. So actually it's an advantage to have self-esteem, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful. So what I say to people is we're not going to lose that. We're going to say, right, we'll challenge the low self-esteem and say, what's its purpose? And we'll replace it with something much more rational. So we move systems. And then we start saying, right, how would you measure self-esteem? And what you'll find is, generally, the reason we've gone into survival low self-esteem for protection is we're looking externally to see what we've achieved and what other people think of us. Rather than moving system, which is, it's not about other people, it's what I think of myself. And we're back to values, and then suddenly self-esteem rises. Because it's not based on achievement, on possession, on what other people think. It's based on me and the way I'm conducting myself and living my life.
So for people listening to this, and I can think of a few in my own life there's one person I know who puts so much effort into how they look. And I'm like, why are you spending so much time doing that? And so, I like to look nice. But I actually think it's because they're really concerned about other people's opinion of how they look. How can people start to ask themselves the right questions to unlock this?
I think it's, again, this is the way I've approached this, and from about 30 years ago, looking at what functional MRI scanners are telling us about this is real time, of how the brain functions and what research is done. And so when you say about the way I look, not everything can be translated from mythology. That's the study of animals in the wild. But in the 90s, when it became apparent to me that the brain was divided here and there was something going on that was more scientific than just, we've got these good and bad days, I looked to the hominid specialists, the great apes, and the chimpanzee is not our closest relative genetically, it isn't, but it's closest in terms of neurotransmitter systems and the way the brain is structured. So we find that the same system operates in the chimp as does ourselves. So for a chimpanzee, for safety, it's got to look good. It's got to be strong. So a chimp that's not looking good in terms of the troop or isn't strong will be excluded, and that can be death. So we're inbuilt to worry about other people's opinions. Yeah. So that system within us, which the chimp shares, I'm saying is meant to do that. So the starting point is to not say it's a fault, but say it's normal. That's great. It's absolutely healthy. It's not helpful, but it's healthy. So it's a subtlety that I think helps a lot of people. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with you, because people come in saying, what is wrong with me? I eat too much. Whatever it is, I worry all the time. I'm saying, there's nothing wrong. That's absolutely healthy. Anyone who doesn't worry is probably unwell. So it's a different way of looking at it to say, however, because it's not helpful, let's learn how to move systems because we don't want to stay there. But I have to respect the young lady, young man, or older person who says my looks are crucial to my happiness. If that's their determining factor, all I can do is say, well, okay, let's look at the consequence of that. And as long as you understand the consequence and how to deal with it, then that's a choice they're making. It's not for me to say switch system. I'm saying there is an alternative.
I think what would be really useful, Steve, if you wouldn't mind, is would you tell us about how we can spot when we're in the chimp system, and then you talk about moving it to the human.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
The rule I always use, which works usually, is to just say, do I want this? Do I want to rely on what other people think for my happiness? So once I've got that question, and nearly everyone says no, and I say, okay, there's an alternative, and that's own your own happiness. So it's a skill now. This is your difficulty. So let's say my chimp brain would be concerned about what you think I'm saying, and is it coming over well? And, so my chimp would now naturally do it. But then that's giving you my happiness. So many, many years ago, as a psych, I thought I'm going to have to be balanced myself if I'm going to help people. So I worked on myself. And these were epiphanies I had that said, as long as I keep looking to you for my happiness, I'm in trouble. Because it only needs you to make one comment and I'm down. So I decided, no, there must be a way I can take my happiness back, and that's what I worked on. But that was a skill. It didn't happen overnight. And I'd have to check myself and think, hang on, you're giving them your happiness again. And then I have to say, what do you want? I don't want that. That's a chimp trying to say I rely on you to keep me in the troop. I want it to say, I'm not in a troop. I'm not in the jungle. I'm a human being in a society, and I own my happiness. So that skill had to be worked on. And you have to continually do it. It's a bit like getting fit. For me, emotional skills, you've got to keep practicing. Otherwise, you go off. So it's not something you learn and then that's it. It's something you practice every day.
But I think this is actually a powerful thing just to pick up on for a moment, because we all know people that go, oh, I'm not very resilient. I'm a natural worrier. I'm just the kind of person that cares what other people think. I just want to get across that you're talking about this is a skill, this is a learned behaviour, that just because you think a certain way now doesn't mean that's the only way your brain can think.
No, this is why, say someone said that. Again, I think it's important to understand how you find yourself, which I try and do with people, and that is, and I put these in the books, that the blank piece of paper exercise. So when I started working on this, it became obvious that if you think about it, if we remove this influence of this primitive survival system, which thinks for us, and we remove the center of the brain, which is like stored information and automatic behaviors, you're left with yourself. You're left with a part of the brain we can actually control. It's the only bit we can control. So then I said, let's imagine I've surgically removed them. And you're left, you've got a blank piece of paper. How do you want to be? And you would say, confident, happy, carefree, compassionate, sense of humour. And what I keep saying, you've just described yourself. And it's an epiphany if people can grasp this. You've now told me who you are. I've got you. What they then say is, which they say to me, but Steve, I'm not calm, I'm not. And I say, yes, you are. You don't confuse what the brain is doing. It comes in and takes over, hijacks you, and presents to the world someone who's anxious. But for you to tell me when you walk in, how's your week? Oh, I'm get so anxious. Scientifically, that's just inaccurate. So I correct people and say, that's not possible. It's not on your list. You don't put the perfect me anxious. Yeah. So you take that and you say, that's clearly the influence of either the chimp or the computer system. So now we need to learn how we manage that to prevent it presenting to the world. And if you think, there's some obvious things that if you look, you'll see it. The reality is, your partner, if you've got one, or your brother, sister, if they're close, or best friend, knows you. And they'll tell you, this is you. I've seen the calm, confident, but then they say, but when you get into this situation, and they're describing what I saw 30 years ago, the brain shifted, and it went into a system that we're given during fetal life. Right. And so I'm saying, move back again.
How do you mean we're giving it during fetal life?
In the fetus, this chimp system and computer system start taking off. So they're operational within 8 weeks of fetal life. So we can measure them moving. Whereas the human sisters I'm calling as you don't come into being till around 3. So you don't really exist, which I always joke about because you have no memory. So it's telling you weren't there, for 3 years. And we know this, anyone who's got kids, they're just little robots.
Yeah.
But
It's depressing because you spend loads of money on expensive holidays.
Yeah.
And you say to your kids, did you love that? And they're like, what? We
Yeah.
went where?
Yeah.
We did what?
Well, I can't remember. But at 3, you come in because the system that we operate with is rational, logical, and so they say why. So the second they have the why questions, you've arrived. And it's important that parents then prime that system because, again, if you use that system predominantly in the neurological terms, it myelinates, which means it's preferential and uses it at speed. Whereas if you push them back to a chimp system, which is dominance behavior, you'll end up myelinating the chimp system and the child therefore will preferentially use that. So they'll use emotion as the basis of going forward rather than logic.
So, we have a mental health crisis among young people in the UK. What's happening then from the age of 3 when they start asking why to the age of 12 or 13 when they need to seek therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make people feel guilty. I'm going to. But you watch and observe people, and what happens is, I'm exaggerating for effect, but the parent or teacher or whoever's in charge, the guardian, will the child say, why? And it becomes incessant. And then you hear them say, because I said so. And if you think that stripping it down to what it is a dominance, you will do because I said. There's no collaboration, there's no empowerment, it's total dominance and removing. So what you've done is you've said to them, that's how my system works, the chimp system. I dominate, you do. So they moved into the chimp system. So then they agitate and rebel, but you created that.
Right.
Now, it's not as easy as I'm saying it. I understand that children are in chimp mode a lot. Yeah. But if you actually sat down, and it's hard when you're a busy parent or a teacher with 30-odd kids, to say, can I explain why I'm saying this? The child may not understand still and still kick off, but you're actually sowing seeds that the child's learning that when you have a question why, I'll answer it as best I can. I don't want you to do that because... And it can be simple. Don't eat sweets because they're not that healthy compared to your food. And if you eat sweets, you won't eat your dinner. They'll kick and say, well, I will eat my dinner, So then you have to persuade them. But it's reasoning rather than just going, right, here's the sweets taken away, you will wait. And then you have tantrums. Yeah. And you're promoting the chimp behaviours. So they'll carry it on. So the danger is, if we use this a parent system where you are the judge, jury, executioner, it's a subtle one, and I push this in the books, to say what we tend to do with children is we compliment things they do instead of asking them to compliment themselves or criticise themselves. So we're not building analytical self-awareness, self-criticism, self-compliment. If you do that, and the evidence is overwhelming, and you can start as young as 4, so you ask them when you paint a picture, tell me what's good, what's not so good, what would you improve on? You can still give approval after they've given a constructive opinion. 10 years on, they don't get thrown around by things like social media because they're the judge, not what people say. Whereas if we keep saying, that's a wonderful picture, what we're doing is externalizing, again, approval. So what you've now got is they move through life looking for your approval because you're priming that. So they won't actually then say, well, I'm actually pleased with what I've done, or I think I could have done better here, in a very objective way, which is a skill and we have to teach children. But the evidence is if we do that, at 14, they then become more self-supportive, more self-critical, and the resilience stays.
That is some of the most powerful parenting advice I've ever heard on this show,
Well, it is, but I'm interested, Steve, in that and like my children are a little bit older than 4, and I'm thinking, can this...
You're going to tell me you've ruined them. Go on.
Well, no, I'm wondering, can you undo some of these habits then?
Yes. Yeah, it's not as easy. We know there are windows of development. Cool. And so we do know, and I'm speaking very generally, that between around 4 and 8, we know that there's a big influence on the child's brain and its development, depending on what we stimulate it to. So the more we activate the brain during those years, we know the pathways operate better later on. But that doesn't mean you've lost it. It just means there were windows. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. If you've got parents who are bilingual, the child will easily speak 2 languages by the time it's 5, because the brain is easy. But if you try bringing it in at 10, and the brain has already reset to English or whichever language you've got, and then it finds it mostly a bit more of a struggle unless it's adept at doing that. So we find the second language more difficult. Okay. So, and it's similar with all concepts in the brain. You're priming them. So in the brain then is more or less starting to fix around 8, 9-year-old, but it's still pliable. You can learn a language at my age. It just means it may be a bit more difficult because you primed your brain at 3 or 4.
Yeah. And how much do you know about the impact of social media and the fact that so many young people seem to now get their validation from what they see online or the things they share?
Well,
online?
as I say that to me, I'm generalising, and there's lots of factors, so I'm sure there's a lot more to than what I'm giving you. But we're saying right from the beginning, we've learned that external validation is the way things work. From parents, teachers, school, we've learned we're given grades, we're given results. Instead of saying, what do you think? What do you think's important? What do you feel you're doing well at? How would you improve yourself? And then a child that does that is able to criticise. I won't give any names, but I did this a long time ago with a group of coaches in sport many years ago. And one of the guys, a wife was about to have a baby. And he said, my child will not be what I call the fridge door syndrome. And that means you put the picture on the fridge door because you approve of it instead of the child deciding. And 6 years on, true story, he came to me and said, I've got speech. We went to a school open day, first parent evening, and they said, why can't all children be like him? Because he doesn't mind trying anything. He doesn't get upset if he can't do it. So I was pleased, but I was quite thought it was a backhanded comment because he said, so what you do actually works. I thought, wow, that's nice to know. I spent my life doing it. But it was nice to hear that because it was evidence, again, small, anecdotal, but that we can change it. Just said, we can actually change the way people start assessing themselves. Yeah. Like I gave you an example on your own happiness. You can start learning, and that's going to give you resilience. We've talked already about values. That's going to give you peace of mind. So it's never too late to start saying, I'm going to understand my mind, how it works, and I'm going to learn these skills, and I'm going to keep going.
Brilliant.
So it's never too late.
But there is something as well, Stephen, this is a bit of a personal request in many ways, that I often struggle with sort of difficult conversations with people. So even though I might own my own happiness, I'm often conscious of the happiness of other people, that if I say no, I might cause upset or disappointment. And I really struggle to have those conversations.
Can I, again, I don't know, because this is like instant, so I'm just going to knee-jerk reaction. Why are you worried about them being upset if there's something you're saying which is honest, genuine, and coming from your heart? Because sometimes being upset is not a bad thing. Okay. It sort of jolts us to think, oh, wow, that's upset me. If the person blames you, then obviously I'd say they're in chimp mode. You can't do much, but you're likely that they'll go away and reflect on that. So if you said something to me and it hurt, and I thought, wow, after I've got away from you, and I start reflecting, well, the guy actually might have a bit of truth in this. So actually, you've done some good. But the fact I might get upset, it's not, I don't think that should worry you, because you have to think sometimes you've got to say things which are uncomfortable. I'm not sure in what way you're upsetting people.
Sure. Well, I mean,
I don't think you are. I don't think you are upset, but I think you worry. You almost write a story in your head that this is going to be awful. They're going to be disappointed. I'm going to have let them down. But Damian can't say no, basically.
But that's a belief, you see, of that if I say no or whatever it is, that person is upset and therefore I'm in the wrong. And my job is not to upset people. And I'm challenging that belief to say your job is to be honest and using integrity. I'm being, again, sweeping generalised statements here. But if you said to me, Steve, I resonate with that, then do what you're doing. If they get upset, that's not your problem. If you've been reasonable and honest, then you have to say that's reasonable. That being upset might help them in the long run.
So the idea then of exploring beliefs is interesting because, as you're saying it, it was that line you said there about beliefs, that my belief is that if I don't comply or if I don't help you when I could do, that means that you might not love me, you might not come back and ask me for help again, I might disappoint you, and I don't like disappointing you. How do we start to rewrite some of these beliefs that we might have had since we were kids?
But you've hit the nail on the head. It's coming back from way back when, so you've got to look and say, how did you learn that? And I don't want to do this on camera, but if I were doing an analysis of you start thinking your own insecurities. Sometimes I don't know why you're doing it, but if I gain approval from them, don't upset them, then that's better.
Yeah.
So you're not approving of yourself. Just going back to the conversation we just had, you're getting external validation for you being this great person, this good person. And then your belief is if they're happy of what I've done, or that makes me a good person, instead of saying, actually, it doesn't make you a good person, it makes them happy. That's all it does. But it could come at a cost. And the cost is to you and to them. That, sometimes not being happy is not a bad thing. It's time for us to reflect. So you may not be doing them any favours.
So in our 3 systems then, where do those beliefs reside?
Payhawk has changed everything. I can control the company's spend in just a few clicks. All our day-to-day tasks are automated, and I have more time to take part in strategic decision-making. I mean, too easy. But here's my secret. I miss the old days. Collecting receipts. Worrying when a sales rep leaves with the company card. Getting surprised by the cash flow. That's all in the past with Payhawk.
What you've got in the way that the brain is structured, the way I've made it as a model, and it's not for everybody, so I'm not promoting it. I just certainly don't want a cult. Is I'm trying to say that if you've got the chimp giving you these ways of coping to get approval and stay in the troop, then it's going to say you must never say no.
Right.
I'm being, again, just right. Whereas the human would come in and use logic now and say, well, are there times when saying no is actually the right thing to do? And it may make me feel unpopular. My chimp's going, oh, this is wrong. But actually, I'm not a chimp. I'm not gaining approval. I'm saying this is the rational thing to do. It's not going to do me any favours. So I've got to say, no, I can't do that at the moment because I've got too much on, or I haven't got the skill base to help you. So you learn how to do it. So, but I think you've got an ingrained belief sat in the computer. So the second that's been put in by the chimp, I assume, and therefore, whenever someone asks you, can you do this for me, Damian? There's a little gremlin, which is the unhelpful, but he prods the chimp, and the chimp goes, of course I'll do it.
You know what, though, Steve? It's amazing how hard it is to unpick these ingrained beliefs, isn't it? I mean, we've now hosted this show for 5 years, 300 episodes. Damian must have talked about saying no on the show 10 times.
Yeah.
He must have mentioned it to me over 100 times. I must have seen him on 300 or 400 separate occasions where I say, how are you? And he goes, I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm just doing too much. And it's a really great reminder, isn't it, that we can't simplify this stuff necessarily. That it's hard. Like Damian's
I think the reason is that, and again, I don't know, because it sounds like you're crying out to say, I'd like to change this, and I don't know how to do it. But I don't know you've done any work on it, because if you're doing it week after week, then nobody's worked with you. So if you then said, right, Steve, work with me, then we've got to crack this and actually see, gremlins don't, these are the unhelpful beliefs, don't dance alone. There's always a gang of them. So,
Go on, say more on that.
So I'm going to be saying there's a lot of beliefs you've got, which are all putting them back in again. So we have to mop up the entire gang, and we find how many beliefs have you got that are promoting this action. It isn't going to be one.
Yep.
So if we can find them, and I don't know what they'll be, and we dig all these beliefs out, and some will come from childhood experiences, some come from everyday experiences now, and then we challenge them. We have to now not just remove, but replace them. So each belief you hold, I need to get a counter belief, which actually will knock this out. So neuroscientifically, you're forming a new pathway in the brain, and it literally will change. And then you preferentially use that pathway until eventually that was it. It's now fixed. The other pathway will literally die. So you will find your behaviours now have altered because your brain is now taking over. Okay. You primed it. The difficulty as well is that it has to resonate with you. I have no idea what's going to resonate. So I sit here glibly saying, well, don't try and please other people because you're not helping them. That may not resonate with you. You might say, I don't believe that, Steve.
So when you work with people, they have to own it. It's not you giving your thought, your opinion, your belief.
I offer stuff and they might go, oh, yeah, you've nailed it. Because we have common beliefs that are problems to us and common experiences because of the way the brain is built. But then it comes to unique things. And I don't know what you've said but to others, but you might come in with something very personal, which is unique to you. And we need to really nail that. That's where it's coming from. And I don't know, you don't need to answer, but it can even be as simple as a comment made by a teacher or a parent at a time where you had a very vulnerable moment. Interesting, I did a big talk to a lot of teachers recently, and I asked them in the audience, said, can you tell me if at any point in your childhood, in your schooling days, a teacher said a comment that really upset you and you're still holding on to it? Half the audience put hands up. So you think, well, why haven't you processed it? You know, and sometimes you can't process, sometimes it's really fixed. So then we learn how to manage it, which is different. But then I also asked how many people had a compliment from a teacher or parent that stuck with them? And half the audience again. So it's very powerful that we put these beliefs in our computer system and they sit there. Some we can turn over, some we can't. And again, we have to learn which ones we can and which ones we can't. And when we can't turn them over, we then got to learn how to manage them when they appear. Recognize and manage them. So you can see it's like, it's a work of skill base that it's very unique to you. I want to jump back to something I said because I think people listening, especially as teachers, they're going to the resilience bit for 4-year-olds up to 8 and then as teenagers. You have to remember that teenagers flick over, go through hormonal changes, which creates havoc. So all the work we do, we hope there's a probability it'll stabilize them, but it may not. It depends how much the hormones kick in. So, you know, I don't want parents or teachers to think I've still failed because they've turned into a creature I don't recognize. There is that massive influence. And whatever you do, you're going to lose because they need to go through this stage. And the brain has taken over and it will take over. So I just want, you know, what we're saying is these are ideas and concepts which have a real basis in research, but it's still probabilities. It's still what we're doing is swaying the probability of getting the child to be in a great place.
So good. You've mentioned resilience a few times. And in your new book, A Path Through the Jungle, you start the book by talking about 2 key attributes, robustness and resilience. Why were they so important that was the first message you wanted people to see in that book?
The reason was that these are only my terms as well. So as I'm saying, I'm not trying to say I'm right. I'm not. I'm saying when I'm working with people, we need to know what the term really means. So if you work with me, to be robust means you have a plan. You know, it's like saying, is this toy robust? It's been manufactured, so we test it out. We think it's robust, then we hand it to the kids. And then we find whether it is or not. So the robustness is you having a plan. So you say, right, here's my plan of when I leave this room, I'm going to rely on my values. I'm going to rely on working in reality. I'm going to be able to get perspective. Now we're going to go outside and test it. So robustness, everyone can do. There's no excuse for not having plans. It's just a lot of work, but it may need a lot of guidance. When you've got robustness, going out, resilience, I'm defining as a skill. So it may not work. You're going to have to learn how to be resilient. But I'm going to contradict myself. When I wrote this, everyone says, build resilience, build resilience. The science doesn't actually back that. What it does, which I do say, but people don't like it, is you are resilient. You can't build resilience. Your mind is 100% resilient. And maybe I should have put that. What I'm really saying is you're 100% resilient. How do we stop resilience from failing?
Right.
We are resilient. We have very resilient brains. But what we have is parts of the brain, like your little gremlins, which reduce resilience. Right. So it's not truly building resilience, but it's an easier concept to say, right, we'll build a skill and therefore we'll see more and more resilience come. The reality is we're removing things that are stopping resilience.
And what are the biggest things that we do to impede our resilience?
Well, the brain has certain areas which I talk about one bit called the what if button, and it literally is an area of the brain which uses what if, and it depends how we use what if. But if we use it emotionally, it'll ask questions like, what if I fail my GCSEs? What if I fail my driving test? What if my partner leaves me? And these are emotional questions, and we often sit with them. We don't answer them. So if you don't answer them, then your resilience is going to start tumbling.
Right.
And it goes through your head. And instead of sitting with the problem, you got to say, well, let's look at, what the solution is. So what if my partner leaves me? And then you've got to challenge it. Now, if someone says to me, I will fall apart and life's not worth living, if that's non-negotiable, I have to say, let's look at consequence and let's work very hard on not let them leave. But if I say, right, let's really challenge that belief and rationalize it, most people start saying, okay, it's not what I want. I will go through grief. I will be upset. I'll survive. There is life after. That can actually help the relationship because you then, and again, I'm exaggerating and I'm generalizing, you're not as needy. So there's no reason to then try and control them and stop them leaving, and which is what we do when we haven't got a plan in case they leave. So we have plans if it goes wrong. Now that's a different question if. If my partner leaves me is an emotional question, I'll go through. If my partner leaves me, what's the plan? Is now actually using that what if button from the human rather than the chimp. So the button's available to both, but it's a different what if question.
So it sounds like we've heard a term from one of our guests about pre-mortems, almost work out what are the things that could kill me and then plan for how I deal with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the principle of the brain is when you use the human system, it always says, let's start with what we've got and then we'll move forward. What's the plan to use? What's presenting to me? Whereas the chimp doesn't do that. It can't. It starts with what I want and then compares to reality, which is not a good way to start. But that's how it does. And that's what most people go through the day with. Hence, you get road rage. You're saying, I want the traffic to flow smoothly. No one jumps in. No one cuts me up. Everyone's, it's so, I'm glad you're laughing. It's so ridiculous. Yeah. It's a ridiculous concept. There are always going to be idiots on the road or people having a bad day or people making mistakes, but our chimps don't interpret any of that. It's just, I am not getting what I expect to happen. So here we go. And that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can set off in a different mode by saying there will be idiots, there'll be people who make mistakes, and there are people who might regret what they've done. But again, do you want to go into chimp mode?
So we're not realising then, generally, and again, I'm generalising as well, we don't realise that our thinking is what's tripping us up. We're here going, the world's tripping us up. Idiots on the roads are making me unhappy.
Yes.
Late tubes are frustrating me. Partners that won't listen are angering me. Children that don't get ready for school in time frustrate me. And actually, so much of that is our interpretation of those things.
Yeah, and this is probably, you've hit what I really do with people. And that is to say, when I mentioned the human and chimp is, the bottom line is, whenever I work with anyone, I take them away from their world. Because I keep saying, if we can get you in a room and get your robustness and prepare for resilience, if someone's in a good place, nothing touches them. If someone's not in a good place, anything can touch them. That's my philosophy. So, and I stick to that. So I say, if I can get you in a good place and show you how to run your mind, nothing's going to touch you. The kids won't touch you getting late for school because you'll deal with it. Someone cuts you up, you won't have road rage. In fact, nothing's going to get to you. Now, I'm not wanting people to be robots, but I'm saying you'll manage any feeling you get, any emotion. But generally, most of the negative emotions won't appear. They just don't happen. And I get that from people that say, normally I'd go mad and suddenly nothing happened.
So is a technique, would you tell us the technique then, Steve, about how, because I'm thinking it might be like before you get in the car, almost saying to yourself, there's going to be idiots, there's going to be crashes, there's going to be hold-ups.
Yeah.
Let's just deal with that in a calm way. Is that the kind of...
Yeah, keep it simple, because although the neuroscience is very heavy, and I've simplified it just so people can access their mind, it is complex and the devil is in the detail. But if you keep it simple, so you say to me, I get road rage, right? So I would say, first of all, stop. You don't get road rage. You don't. Your chimp gets road rage. On your perfect blank piece of paper, you don't write road rage. Yeah. So you'll say, now that's crazy. So we're saying, right, recognize it's not you. You need to understand what the chimp's doing and correct it and say, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So have a relationship with this part of your brain. So then I'd say, right, when you're setting off, I'm being simplistic. Yeah. To learn the emotional skill is, before you set off, say, right, we know it's going to happen. We know these events are possible, right? So when they happen, I'm going to program my computer with some beliefs, such as, and I'll give you an example, which is a true story. I did a conference and a guy came up to us, a cube people, which I encourage. And they were challenging, but this guy didn't. He just said, I get road rage and it's really bad. And I don't know what to do because I've got like 20 seconds. So I said to him, I tell you what, drive your car, put your hands up. And he did driving the wheel. And I said, right, okay, I've cut you up. Show me what you do. It was perfect. He waved his hands and started blaspheming. I said, what do you look like? And he laughed and he said, a chimp. I said, well, that's fine then. If you want to look like a chimp, do it. Let me know how it goes. And he never had road rage again. And paradoxically, he said, my chimp didn't want to look like a chimp. And he said, it stopped me to say, don't look foolish. So you actually use the chimp against itself.
That's amazing. So what we're saying then is to the audience listening to this, you choose what to believe.
Exactly. You have to decide, I want to go to work and enjoy it. I want to set off good place. I want to end in a good place. But I'm preparing for anything that might happen. But anything that happens, I'm going to program my computer because it works quicker than chimp and human. So your computer's going to come in, not you. You're not going to talk to your chimp. It's going to do it. Because the chimp, the way the brain's structured, the chimp must consult the computer before it reacts. And that's done in, a fifth of a second. It's very fast. So if you primed it with what I call the autopilot, which goes, I don't want to look like a chimp. Someone cuts you up. As the chimp is about to screech, it pauses. And then you'll say, nothing happened because the computer took over and advised the chimp and then said, no, we pull back. And we can prime you to say, when someone cuts you up, just pull back. And then I want you to talk about, and it may not resonate with you, how good do you feel at being able to pull back? And if someone says, do you know what, I feel empowered.
Yeah.
It's no different to my previous existence as a forensic psych. And you get people with anger management problems and they'll say, and they're against their chimp. And then I'll say to them, would a strong man get in a fight or would they walk away? And I'm being, again, simplistic to do it. And the guys who go, actually, a strong man walks away, they said, you feel so good.
Yep.
You just don't engage it. And they said, it actually changed me. And I perceived myself then as this powerful guy. But again, it may not resonate. Yeah. But this is why I keep saying it. It's up to people, anyone listening, to make the mind up to explore their mind and say, let me start understanding. And they don't have to use my model, the chimp model. I think there's lots of good stuff out there. And so I encourage people to get something that resonates with you. And I'm an academic, I'm a professor in the university, and therefore I've got an evidence-based. I would say if something works for you and it's not evidence-based, I'm not too worried. I'm just saying, if it fails, well,
Sure. Do you mind if I...
No, go on.
I'd like to ask you a question, kind of selfish, because it's about my wife. So
Okay.
she grew up in a family where there was a real fear of being ill.
Okay.
If you were sick or it was like the end of the world, her mum still worries about it now. And she's much better than her mum, but still spends too much time fearing the worst or fearing people are going to be ill. Like she almost, when she wakes up in the morning, she does like a full body check. Like, it only takes a couple of seconds, but she's like, do I feel ill? Do I feel ill? It's a derailing way to live. So what do you do when you know that you've got it from your parents? You're smart enough to understand this was kind of put into you. You know that your grandparents felt the same. Your sister feels the same. How do you begin then to do the work?
Okay, so I'd start with, and I don't know your wife, and it's highly unfair that she's being publicised. So
she always tells
She's all right. She's
well used to it. Sometimes
I'm going to drink some coffee. Not that I'm sweating, but
I'll tell you this,
I'm
Steve,
dry.
that Harriet, Jake's wife, will regularly go to the supermarket and people will come up and recount anecdotes Jake has shared on this with her. So
they're like, are you okay? And she's like, what have you been saying?
Probably need to work with the poor woman, not about this health, but
her husband.
Yeah, bring it as the public domain. Let's generalise, not to her. Whenever someone has something like this, the first question is, do you want to change this behaviour? Because if they say no, or it's not that important, then I'm probably not going to do anything, because experience tells me that you must have certain factors in place if you're going to shift. And one of those is you must see that what you're doing is so dysfunctional and it's actually got in detriment. But if it's not got any detriment, so she says, well, and I check myself over, it doesn't hurt, it takes a minute, and it reassures me, then she's probably not going to want to change that. If she said, it's really destroying me, now we're in business to say, right, well, there's a definite thing we've got to shift. And then if she said that, we've got to start looking and saying, okay, what beliefs does she hold? about health and what's the experience. If this is in the family, there's got to be a reason it's come in. So whether there's been an incident in the family where a doctor's missed something and somebody's died, this might be it. Or it may be just a lot of us are somatizers. When we get anxious, we start making physical symptoms and then we start thinking something's wrong with me. So then we get health concerns. So we have to say, right, let's have a look. It could even be that, where we say, when you get anxious about something, let's not make it into a physical thing. Or it's normalizing it, saying that, most people, which some people who are worried about the health don't understand, that most of us get headaches. Most of us get aches and pains in our stomach. Most of us. And so we dismiss them and don't worry. And she may not realize that it's normal. Maybe she believes it's her, which is emphasizing it again. Alternatively, she could be saying that there's certain disorders, I don't know, that she's looking for. It's not.
It's more the fear of being ill, of like being sick.
Yeah.
Getting ill that day, if we travel or something, what if I start to feel
And
sick?
again, I don't know, because we'd have to dig and say, well, what's the consequence of that? Go beyond it. Go beyond it. Don't aim at it. It's a bit like I say to people, if they have a feel like the dentist, stop looking at being in the dentist chair, look at walking out. Go beyond an event. Because going beyond an event starts giving you, right, I can get through it because there's an after event. If you keep focusing on the event, you can't move because you're dreading it. And if she's dreading being sick in the car or whatever, then you can't get beyond it. You've stopped your focus. So I don't know. I don't know what she's going to give me. It's like she could give me anything.
What is interesting, though, is when you mention like the past, I think we get so caught up that this is our life, this is our story, this is our problem.
Yeah.
All of us being kind to ourselves. Like, I hate my kids being out of my sight. I do think someone in my family history lost a kid somewhere or something happened, right? Because it gives me an irrational fear. And I know it's an irrational fear, therefore I understand it and try and ignore it as best I can. And I say, in 10 seconds, you'll be so relieved because your son will walk around the corner. It's even when they're in the back garden. So I think an understanding that, like, we do carry these things from
But again,
our
I mean,
ancestors.
what you've just described, I'm thinking that it's necessary. If that were missing, then it's more concerning.
Yeah. Right.
What you're saying is it's strong in me, which is fine. You're just saying, how do I manage it? And the answer is, like you're doing. But I think the way you've said it, you haven't normalized it for you and saying this is okay. It's quite a healthy thing to do. It'd be far more worrying if Dad said, I don't know where they are. That would be worrying.
Yeah.
So again, it's normalizing it for you and saying this is good. It's only if it got to the point where it was detrimental to you or the children that you think maybe we should address it. But you're not giving me that. You're saying, I have these terrible things and I'm okay. And so you've actually managed it. So it's probably not worth addressing.
Perfect.
I think there's something that is really resonating as you're talking, Steve, around that. I think it is a lovely antidote to that this thing that's crept into our culture in the last 20 or 30 years, which is this idea of positivity. Like relentless positivity, that if we're not feeling happy, if we don't see the best in every situation, it means that there's something wrong with us. What's your views on the dangers of thinking that that's...
If it works for people, that's up to them. I mean, I guess my stance is reality.
Yeah.
That most days are days. We're not happy, we're not sad, we just go through life and we fluctuate. And there's days you get up and think, don't feel so good today. And then I always say, let's just see what you can do to manage it. But it's interesting going to my clinical work from a long time back, and you get people with mood disorders. And obviously that can be an illness, but then you get people who are referred who are just, like they go up and down a lot in mood, but they're actually not ill. It's just their barometer goes up and down a lot. They're quite emotional type people, and it's a case of managing it. But you get the person who's almost blunted and they have the same level and they don't have these highs and they don't have the lows. It's interesting if you ask, which would you prefer? People want the highs and the lows. So we're emotional creatures and most people don't want a flat line.
Yeah.
They say, no, I'd rather have highs. I just need to know how to manage the lows or try and avoid them. So again, it's teasing out to people, which would you like? And I play devil. I say, I'm the devil. I give you the choice. And then you make it. And they always say, go up and down. I said, so now we've established you want up and down. Let's look at what we can do to minimise the down or work with it.
What about dealing with pressure? Because that's a common feature that we've met in our high performers, that a distinction is those that can lean into pressure rather than lean away from it. let's say it's somebody that has to perform on a certain day. If you take the Olympics, where you have to turn up on that day, and that's going to determine a gold medal or otherwise. So how would you help them prepare for that key moment? For other people, it might be an exam or it might be a presentation in the non-sporting world.
Again, I have to work with the person. So I'm going to be very generic and say, right, if I were, say, in an exam or the Olympics, is it helping you? Is it helping you to think, I have one chance? Is that actually helping? You know? And the reason you laugh is most people go, not really, no. So why would you choose to focus on that? You know, you do have a choice. Mm-hmm. You do have a choice. And again, here's a skill. So we're going to say, what would help? So if you got an Olympian, what's going to help them to get the best out of it? And it's clear then, it's just process driven. You know? So then we say, right, what would stop you sticking to process? Now, I don't know what they're going to say. They might say the crowd. You know, it's all right saying don't focus, but I go into an Olympic arena, say like it's a track and field event, and you've got X thousand people and, you know, cameras there, and there's millions of people watching. And then they go back to it is one chance, you know. Yeah. And so we have to say, right, how we're going to manage that. So we're going to learn, how do you get into complete focus and you remove it? Now, I can give you a famous person because they've gone public about this. Sure. And obviously it's a good friend, and that's Chris Hoy. When I first started work, I went to privileged to Athens Olympics, and he had to do the kilo. And I got on really well with Chris straight away. He's a very easy guy if you don't know him. Real gentleman. And when we got there, we had primed him to go focus, because it's an event which he could easily do by focus. So heart and soul into it. And on the day, he said, after the event, he got his gold, and he said he forgot where he was. That's how well he'd done. But we primed that for twice a day, 20 minutes at the holding camp. I know he's gone public about this, sure, and give me permission to speak.
And he spoke on here about it as well, Steve.
Yeah,
so.
Right. And I remember him saying he looked up and saw the flags and remembered it was the Olympics. Now that's perfection, which he was, you know, a guy who could really commit to it. So there's an example where, you know, he's not a super being in the sense of, well, it must have been natural for him. It wasn't. He worked on it, and he worked hard to say, right, I'm going to get there. He bought in and just go into complete what I call computer mode. Now, that's not as easy in a footballer. So we have to use a very different technique because you can't stay in it. It's not as easy in someone like snooker, where I'm involved heavily. There's a lot of sports you have to, in golf, they all have their peculiarities. So again, I've got to go to their world, having got them in a good place, and say, right, you've chosen to do this sport or this business or this career, and now I have to understand the nuances. So I'm no expert in sport, but I go to each sport and think, what is it you're perceiving as the stress points or the distraction points, and then I work with them on what they are perceiving.
We've had some incredible conversations on this show with footballers who talk about the kind of unrelenting pressure of being in that world. And, you know, I know some of them have gone public of, you know, your work with the England team, with Raheem Sterling. You know, he was very happy to speak about how you gave him some freedom. When you work with...
I have to say, one of the nicest guys around.
Is that right?
He always started, I'm going to embarrass him if he's listening. Yeah, he always started by saying, can I thank you for seeing me? And I felt, you know, it should be the other way, Raheem. You know, it's my privilege to meet people. But he was such a genuine man, and he gave me his England football shirt, which I've still got signed. And that's.
And are you okay to talk about what you worked on with him? He's spoken, hasn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't go into detail, but I'd say that, again, Raheem was good in that he would tell me what was troubling him, what he didn't want, and then what he did want. So it was easy to say, right, this is what I want to do. And then I would, exactly what I'm saying, I would say, let me tease out, what beliefs have you got that are holding you to have these behaviours that are not helping? And he'd say, well, yeah, but, and then he'd give me X, Y, Z. And I'd say, can we challenge them? And then he'd change the belief and go, you're right. Don't know why I'm thinking that.
So when you work with a footballer, is it?
Let me give you an example to make it concrete. This is not what Raheem did, all right? This is working with others. If you got a striker and they go to get a goal and they miss, and the crowd are unforgiving. We know that they're unforgiving. So now they've got this hissing, booing. They're feeling they're letting the team down. They feel that I'm not scoring. And then finally they score. But in the meantime, they've been so unsettled emotionally that they're making erratic decisions. They're saying, I start taking chances which cause us to lose the ball, and it's dangerous. So we go through all this, and then you say, well, I'm being simplistic again. If you take a top striker, and I did the work on it, I took out all the top strikers and looked at teams like Spanish, Italians, where you had high-fly teams, and said, let's look at theirs. What's the strike rate? What's the success rate? It's as simple as this. And it was something between 1 in 4 and 1 in 8.
Right.
And I said, so let's look at your strike rate. And it was 1 in 5. What's it telling you? That in itself made them relax. I'm allowed to miss it. The crowd are going to boo. But remember, they will cheer when you get your 1 in 5. Keep going. That made them so they said, I'm more rational in my approach. I'm not getting nervous or anxious about, am I going to miss again? I'm just saying, just strike. So, and that confidence to think, I'm allowed to have a go, I'll deal with the crowd, they'll be okay. They're meant to boo. Those beliefs then all changed. So if you're working with someone in that position, my experience was once we'd nailed all the beliefs and they tried it, they said it's great.
After 300 odd episodes of this show, we think that one of the biggest attributes we see time and time again from people that sit in your chair, so-called high performers, is optimism. Is this ability to keep on going even when they get things wrong.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's beliefs you have, and I try and get this to people to say, if you're going to see life as opportunity, it'll be great. If you see it as threat, it's going to always be defensive. So it's a choice. You have a choice. You can say, right, what opportunities can I see in this? There's always learning opportunities, but people don't know how to find them, and they don't even know that they're there. And once you start training people and teaching them and saying, what happened today? What was the opportunity? And it can be simple things. I know it sounds crazy, like I'm a coffee addict here, and we go and the coffee machine's broken and there's no coffee. And I think, okay, now most people go into chimp mode and think, this is crazy, this place, and it's so unhelpful. And you think, what's your learning opportunity? And most people would say, I have no idea, I didn't get any coffee. And I say, how about, when things go wrong, how do you want to come across? Nice. Or if they don't resonate, how do you want to get perspective? Is it going to matter?
Yeah.
And they go, not really. Apply that now for the next week with me and tell me where you suddenly thought, get perspective. Or does it really matter? And they say, wow, because if that's what they keep doing, they say, it's a different world I live in now. Because I'm not getting complaints, I'm not getting uppity, I'm not getting annoyed or frustrated. So I'm being, again, simplistic, but it's the principle that when you've got to get someone to learn. So the opportunistic thing and then being very positive, I think it's more to me of learning to make sensible choices. And that makes the world opportunistic. It makes it more interesting. Otherwise, you're on defense all the time and feared.
Before we finish and move to our quickfire questions, I want to talk to you about something in your new book where you talk about the stone of life.
Yes.
You describe it as the ultimate mind stabilizer.
Yeah.
And I really do want people to come to the end of this brilliant conversation and have a genuine understanding of how they could try and think differently. And I think the idea of the stone of life is so powerful. Would you talk to us about it?
Yeah, what I tried to do when I did this work, and I thank the students at Sheffield Medical School who challenged me every step of the way when I brought it in, and they loved it, but they were relentlessly unforgiving, which is great, and I had to prove it evidence-based. But they were saying it's great to have these, like what I call autopilots. So let's go back to your road rage. Do I want to look like a chimp? Well, that's great. But you're going to have an autopilot for every single thing that happens, like there's no coffee, what's the autopilot? And I said, well, autopilots help in specific circumstances like road rage, but there are the sledgehammer ones which apply everywhere, virtually everywhere. And that is, there are 3 areas which again, my patients taught me this, and I thought there are 3 things that everyone who has resilience is demonstrating. And if we can get that, which I then started teaching people, this is the stone of life, 3 areas, this is the basis for being stable. And one, we've talked about values, because that gives you peace of mind. The other 2 go together. That is, I've talked about reality, where It is what it is. There are certain rules of life. So again, I'll divert to a common one that I get is people want to be popular. But the rule of life is, and again, I'm generalizing it, 1 in 5 people don't like you. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. Generally, like I said, they're the same miserable people, don't like anybody. But why are you going to worry about that? You can't please them, so stop trying. 1 in 5 people love you. And no matter what you do, they're going to love you. So make your world around them. It's great. All right. Both are deluded, but they're great delusions. And 3 in people, if you're reasonable, they like you. Yeah. May not be great bosom buddies. So if you use that as a rule of life, that's the truth of life. You put that on a reality check. You know, you can't negotiate that. But people have to work these out. That's one of mine. They may not agree with me. In which case, they might say 50% of people are not nice, 50%. Okay, well, that's still going to be a rule. So you have to work out what's your truths. You know, not everyone's going to be nice to me is a truth. You know, there's always an opportunity in every experience is a truth. These are solid things you can fall back on. So, and I work out because they're solid and they apply to everything. So again, nothing really matters in the end. Might not resonate with some. It resonates with me.
Yeah.
So therefore I can apply that to road rage. It's not going to matter at the end of the day. So why am I investing in it? So that's a sledgehammer. And I can use that anywhere. There's no coffee. Nothing really matters in the end. So, and if it resonates, I can use that anywhere. So I prime people with the truths of life. And they're unique to the person. And then the final bit was perspective. We know that the chimp system, neuroscientifically, has no perspective. It has no time awareness. So that's why if we go through like a grief reaction and we lose someone close and the chimp system is in operation when we wake up, it feels like it's happened today, even though it was 20 years ago, and it's the same powerful emotions. It doesn't respect time, which is a problem when it comes to decision-making because it can't see time. I'll give some context or perspective. The human can't not use time. So we use another area of the brain which brings time in. So if we switch to the human and give perspective, then we get a big, big stabilizer. You know, everything comes and goes. You know, whatever situation I'm in now, we'll move on. Contextualize it and looking at your life in general. And will it matter in a week's time? That's a good perspective. And most people say that resonates, you know. So there's a lot you can do of using, I like people to have their own perspective.
Yeah.
And then you use that, remind yourself, let's bring this in. So if you start your day with perspective, values, and the truths of life, before you set off, you'll set off in human mode.
That's amazing.
Is that all right?
I love it. More than all right.
Thank you very much.
Steve, can I ask you one question here? And because we were intrigued to do this, a common question we ask our guests is how much of their success they would attribute down to their mental skills and how much of it is down to their physical skills. To give you a context, the great runner Michael Johnson told us it was 100% mental he attributed his success to. Usain Bolt suggested that his was 100% physical. Kelly Holmes told us it was 80-20 in favour of the mental over the physical. So we've had like a real spectrum of responses. What would your answer to that be?
First one, analyse them. I don't think there's a real answer for people because, like you're saying, if Usain Bolt is in a good place anyway, then he doesn't need that. It's not everyone needs to. If you say, well, actually, I'm okay. Whereas if Michael Johnson was saying I wasn't in a great place and I knew that was going to sabotage me, but I believe that was my strength. So you can see how people are going to give different values or percentages. For me, I think I've been very lucky in that my chimp is my success, not me. And people always blame the chimp, and it's my fault for the way I presented it. But I said my chimp wrote the books. I didn't write them.
Say more on that.
There was a moment where my chimp sort of like told me and said, you know, how long do I sit here before you recognise what I'm telling you? And then I asked my chimp, well, why are you doing this? And I used to, it's ridiculous, sounds like crazy, but my chimp would come up with stuff and I think, that's really clever. I hadn't thought of it. And my chimp thought it's generated. I didn't actually do it. And so my chimp does this a lot, and it does it when I'm talking to people. I don't actually consciously be aware. My chimp will say something, oh, that's true. So I'm actually one step behind. So I think that's unusual, but it's the way it works. So when you say my success, my chimp success is. But I think what I've been able to do, the reason it's successful is, as human beings, we all need to be in a good place, and most of us are not. Or we have moments where we're not in a good place, and we all know what it's like, and it's gut-wrenching. And therefore, as someone who's got a background in psychiatric health, you've got this advantage of saying, let me try and help you mentally or psychologically. So you're going to be successful if you can do that, because you're giving people what they really need. So it's not, I don't think it's about me. I think it's more the people I work with. That's because I would say that you're the success. I just give you the tools.
I think it's so good because this whole conversation really has been about helping people to reframe things.
Yeah.
And you've reframed the fact that we talk about having a chimp as being a negative thing. Well, if there's no chimp, there's no Chimp Paradox. If there's no Chimp Paradox, there's no Dr. Steve Peters sitting on our podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Final question before we go to the quick fires. How do you know when it's your chimp?
Right. So I was saying you have to ask, do I want this?
Yeah.
And if you say, no, I don't, then you know it's the chimp. But it might say, like, I'm on a diet and someone offers me, I don't know, something I really want, cheesecake.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I want this. But actually it's fooling you. Because if you say, well, what will you feel like in an hour's time? I'd say pretty bad, actually.
Yeah.
So you can be fooled. The chimp can take over
But
and
your
say
chimp
yes.
said something that that helped you when you were writing your book, did you say?
Yeah, but it can have its moments where it doesn't help. It's not a little angel by any means.
Okay.
No, it's quite, it can deviously try and fool me.
Yeah.
So I've had to work it out. Because like that with the cheesecake, I would say, hang on, I don't want this. So so it was you that was talking and fooling me to believing it was us that wanted
A
cheesecake.
chimp is actually a cheeky bastard because like I should eat less crisps, right? But what my chimp says is, and I talk about crisps a lot, it goes, well, you've earned these crisps today.
And you believe
you've
it.
done a load
It's
of
not the
steps.
chimp's fault. You
You've
believe
been in the
it.
gym. Yeah, but it's because he tricks me.
Well-
Also, I want to believe him because I bloody love crisps, right?
Right.
Or procrastination's a big one for me. I want to believe the chimp because actually going and watching the telly is sometimes a bit more exciting than the thing that I actually have to do.
But again, you could always ask the question, right, in an hour's time, 2 hours' time, what will I feel if I do this? And what will I feel if I do what I think I should do? What would make me actually feel good? And then you've got it, so that you can get around it. But just again, important, people have this idea that chimp's this bad thing. And I keep saying it's the best thing you've got. It is your best friend. It doesn't always help, but best friends often don't. But you got to say it's not helping, give me something else. And the chimp will. There's nothing it does that's not trying to help.
Right.
That's an important concept. It never is against you.
Yeah.
It's trying to help, but its techniques and methods are just a bit suspect and don't often help. And the other is, you can't just go home tonight, and I say this, and shout and lose your temper with your wife and go, sorry, it's just my chimp. You're 100% responsible. It's an accountability model. It's not an excuse model. You're 100% accountable. So no excuses. You have to learn to manage it. And if you don't, you've got to apologise. Say this is unacceptable. But don't blame your chimp. It's not the chimp's fault for being a chimp. You're the one who has to manage it and understand it.
Is there a reason why my chimp is really vocal in the evening when I'll wake up in the morning and feel bad for eating crisps at 10 o'clock the night before? Or I'll wake up and I'll get in the gym and I'll have a great day. By about 9 p.m, the chimp is coming out to play.
Yeah, again, scientifically, which again is obvious, people say, and we know this, is if you have a bad night's sleep or you're getting tired, the chimp's got the upper hand because your human systems start to lock down. Right. So you become much more loose and emotional, which means you don't have the management skills suddenly. So you have to recognise, it'd be like chatting to friends and then suddenly it goes into the early hours of the morning and the conversation could go anywhere. Yeah. And then the next day you think, well, probably shouldn't have gone that far with the conversations. But again, if you have a bad night's sleep, you're likely to be more irritable the next day because your chimp's irritable and, and you can't manage it as well. So there's certain circumstances where we have to have a contingency plan to say, right, I didn't sleep well, so high alert, the chimp's likely to get loose, so we need to have some plans here to make sure it doesn't. And yours, if you recognise it over and over, is to say, right, at 8 o'clock, let's have a conversation about what's happening at 9. We're not doing crisps.
Yeah.
Now, again, if you say, I can't do it, right? I don't know your chimp. I don't know. But you could say to your wife or the kids probably not out to be in bed if they're young. You could say to them, I don't want you to sit back and let daddy's chimp eat crisps. Tell him what you think of it. That can stop you because your chimp doesn't want to look weak. So sometimes using someone else to be the judge, the chimp doesn't like that because it'll still work externally. Whatever you want to do, you might want to work in your own mind. It wants approval. So you can use techniques and tricks where the chimp's hamstrung. It's just, I can't move now.
Brilliant. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I don't know if I'm just
I know,
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
It's been brilliant.
No, thank you. I don't know if I can do quick. I've warned you. It's like throwing a stick for a cat. It's not going to go, you know. All right.
As we come towards the end of this conversation, what's the killer question that we should use to get people straight after this thinking about their own thinking?
I think it's got to be that they have to recognise the advantage. They've got to look and say, what is my mind or emotions doing which is not helping me or other people around me? And if they think, I could improve on this and it's worth it, then they'll do it.
Great.
But if someone says there's no reason to do anything, I'm happy with where life is, whether I upset people or not, or myself, then probably nothing.
So you have to want to be helped.
You have to want to do it. You've got to see something you really want to change.
Yeah.
Okay.
On our app, we have a habits feature. What is the most valuable habit that you have in your work?
Reflection all the time. So about probably 4 times a day, I will stop in my tracks and reset, basically around the stone of life and think, get some perspective, get some reality, keep in human mode. And so I do that maybe 4 times a day and that settles me down again.
What do you say to yourself then?
I go through truths of life. Like, you set off in a good place, let's remain in a good place. And is it going to help if you start losing it?
Yeah.
It's not going to help. So I remind myself, and I talk to the chimp and say, what do we want to do? And the chimp will say, be happy. I say, okay, don't overreact. So I talk all the time, but I do that probably 4 times a day, but it's only for a couple of minutes.
What is your definition of high performance?
I don't think there is one, because if you look at, I'm going to take really bad examples, someone who's pretty unpleasant will give you a definition of success is financial and at the cost of everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not against people who make money, that's up to them, but I'm saying at the cost of everybody else, knowing, but they'd say that's high performance. It's not for me to judge, that's not what I would say.
What's your version?
Whereas if you say high performance is, for me personally, helping other people. We said this before we started recording, I thrive on this because I feel if I can help someone, I get a big kick out of being the support behind the scenes. You mentioned it at the beginning. I like that role. Being in the limelight is not so comfortable, and I'll do it, but I'd much prefer to be behind the scenes and get someone to succeed, because with their successes, I feel I contributed something to it and it's made them happy. So helping others.
What's the first thing you'd like someone to do when they get to the end of this fascinating episode?
Really stop for even 60 seconds and think, has what I've heard made me think there's some work I could do? It's not a big thing. I'm not asking people to do half an hour a night. I'm asking people to start looking at maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, which is not a lot, to start reflecting and get something, as I say, it's not necessarily the chimp model, but get something that they can start work on and chip away. Because the way I try and explain it is, if you are aiming for the moon and you move 1 degree today, by the time you hit the moon, you've moved 1,000,000 miles. So if you're aiming for disaster and not happy life, and you move 1 degree by changing one little thing, a belief, a behavior, you'll be so far down the road, 4 years, 5 years on, people, and I've had this, people say, different partner, because they've started work and slowly but surely the partner can't see it. The person you work with often says, I don't feel I've moved, but the actual partner of the person I'm working with says, definitely. So little changes.
And the final question, what would you like to say to someone who's listened to this incredible conversation, but they actually think that their chimp is so strong that they're beyond help?
Welcome to the rest of us. I think we all feel that at times. Get help. And again, there are lots of people out there. They may not use this model, but, there are so many good clinical psychologists, therapists of all kinds. Nurses are often trained in therapies. There's a lot of independent people. You just got to get someone who understands you and works with you and you're on the same page. So I would recommend people, and the doctors, we do it as well, is reach out and get some help. reach out.
Brilliant. Steve,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank
Loved
you.
it.
I don't think you can be high performance by yourself. I don't think it exists.
Interested in what kind of lessons you could pass on to our listeners.
That is the most interesting question I've ever been asked in my life.
This is High Performance, available to you, your people, and your business right now.